Thank you for attending this webinar about AI. I'm sorry. So the scope of this webinar is that I would like to present you practical experiences that we have done with AI so far. One of my first practical experiences, by the way, is this image on the right, which I find quite fascinating. You can see the prompt below. It's a Gandhara style in the real world is a mixture of Hellenistic art and Indian art, which is in Gandhara, which is now Pakistan. So it is already a fusion. And the prompt kind of fused the Gandhara style, the Buddha into a woman and some futuristic design into it in a way that it looks quite natural. I think this image is, to me, an amazing way of what amazing example of what AI can do. But this is not the topic of the webinar. The topic of the webinar is this. So I'll begin with a little theory. I underlined a little because I've also made webinars with a lot more theory that explains, for example, the terminology, what an embedding is, what a RAG system is, which I will just briefly hit on in this webinar. If you want to know more about it, there are two ways. Either you check out one of our earlier webinars. So there's a webinar on how to design good conversations. There's a webinar on the terminology. There's a webinar also on all the decisions you have to make in order to set up a test bot that really fits your needs and all the trade-offs that you have to do. So all these have been topics of previous webinars. So this webinar is really to show you how the bots that we have set up with various partners work in real life, and to give you an idea of the range of things that these bots can do now for libraries, for university libraries and archives. So if you want to know more about the theory, or if you don't understand all of the terminology I use, don't be afraid. Check out other solutions, other webinars, or at the end of this webinar, there will be a survey of 5 questions, and you can tell me what you would like to hear in the next webinar. That then again could be more technical. But for this webinar, as I said, I will focus on experiences. I will also show everything that I talk about live. So bear with me. After this little theory, I'll go into the 3 use cases that in our experiences of the last 2 years have developed into the 3 main use cases that, at least in our experience, AI bots for universities, university libraries, public libraries, and archives are used in. So as a service bot, like where's my bicycle, what are the opening hours, where's the cafe, what is the curriculum for this semester, where on the campus is my next lecture. All these are service questions. Then we have the documents bot, where you can actually talk with documents, with the whole content of the document. So you can ask, I don't know, you put a work of Hegel inside, or Kant, which even in German is very hard to read. I failed with Kant, but I can now ask the AI, what does he really mean? And maybe then I will understand the categorical imperative, or whatever it's called in English. Third thing, recommendation, which is the focus of this webinar, because the recommendation bot is something that the Cologne University has installed. The recommendation bot, of course, can work in 2 ways. For public libraries, it's more about inspiration, finding something about a topic that you're not really aware of. It's like browsing through a bookshelf, or browsing through Netflix if you want a more modern, but not so nice example. Whereas a recommendation engine in university libraries is more of a research tool, and then you can find studies about XYZ. And of course, in the last part of the webinar, I'll explain the experiences, or basically I copycatted the presentation of the Cologne people who will participate in tomorrow's German meeting, but in English, I took their presentation and will show you the experiences that they have made with the bot that they have published on their website. briefly about me, I'm a lawyer. I was at some point in my life also an art historian. Now I'm a lecturer on AI. I also provide background courses to all those who want to understand better AI. So I'm a lecturer for various institutes. And actually, I love it. As you may notice in this webinar, I just love explaining stuff that I'm fascinated about. And I founded Alpha Library, which is a video on demand service already 20 years ago for public libraries also. And of course, the bot. Why did we do that? I will show you in a second. But before I talk more about me, I'll talk you about the main characters of this presentation. So you have Kai, which is the bot of the University of the Technical University or the University of Applied Sciences of Cologne. Fab, for example, is the bot of the Berlin libraries, which with 4 million media and 430,000 users. So in terms of usage, the biggest partner we have. Then you have USU, which is Universidad Católica de Montevideo, our partner in Latin America. Query is a bot for children. Philo is a service bot, which I'm kind of proud because it's the first time we work with a little city library, and we showed that even for very small institutions, a bot, especially service bots, make sense. And AFA is how it all began. And this is why I'll start the presentation with AFA, our video on demand service, just to show you something. I'll go to my browser. So this is our beautiful video on demand service for public and university libraries with some Charlie Chaplin. Well, Charlie Chaplin is well known, but for example, if you see this film or these films, these are all great art house films that have done very well in festivals. And that I think are cultural, valuable, really interesting, especially also intellectually, not only the action stuff. They have a problem. They have the problem that you don't know the actors, you don't know the directors if you're not really into film and a film buff. And so all these photos of famous directors and actors are missing. So we thought, how can we promote them better? And this is how we came up with what developed to be the first recommendation bot for public libraries in the world, because we launched already in June 2024, which basically means that we started to develop this bot together with the Berlin libraries in March 2024. And this is and now with this bot, you can explore a collection much better because there you can search thematically. One thing, because we have actually, I think in this webinar, more than 54 nations represented in actually the people that registered to this webinar and the one yesterday evening. And one of the main features, I think, that is still, it's known but underestimated, is the way chatbots can be used in every language, which, for example, in Berlin, where we're based, is important because we have pretty much any culture in the world present here in Berlin. So what you can do is, which I find quite fascinating, even though I don't understand the word of it, you go to your browser. I'm doing that now. I'm going to my browser. My browser language is Deutsch, which is German. I can change it to, I believe this is Arabic or Farsi. I don't know because I cannot read it. But I changed my browser setting to this. So now I don't understand a thing. I hope I'll find German when I want to switch it back. And then I go to our bot here, and I just hit new conversation. And all of a sudden, everything is in Arabic. And of course, I could now lead the conversation in Arabic or Farsi. Please tell me in the chat if you recognize what of the two options it is or something completely different. So, and I think the number of languages that the various LLMs that we use can speak or chat with are more than 100. So especially if you live in an environment with many cultures or attract students from many other worlds, I think a chatbot for service questions or for research that can speak all of those languages is of great help. All right, now I'm trying to switch that back. Yeah, I found it. Cool. So that was the language thing. I'm going back to my characters. Actually, I really love that every one of our partners develops their own image, their own character, their own name. I'm a fan of one of them, but of course I'm too diplomatic to tell you. One more information on the screen is, of course, all these, actually many of these bots don't run directly in the library, but were integrated. For example, with library management systems. So the one of FEP with the German library management system, also based here in Berlin, called Aztec. Which also runs many public ministries. Then Koha, of course, for the people in Montevideo, or LMS, or other library management systems. HBZ is the consortia of university libraries in the biggest federal state of Germany. So these bots don't run in thin air or just on our servers. We usually collaborate with integrations of third parties, which is important to know if you set something like this up. Why do we do that? Now comes the theory. How do I get my data into the bot? There are a lot of ideas of, if you listen to things like how training a model or doing fine tuning, none of that is done by regular fellows from university libraries, public libraries, or archives. What we all do is RAG, which is called Retrieval Augmented Generation, which is putting my data into and providing the data to the bot when you're having a chat. This is the short version. So this is the theory. Bear with me. As I said, if you want to know more about this, look at the other webinars or leave us a message in the survey. Especially if I now speak in terms that are not familiar to you, but it's not the topic of the webinar. I just want to provide a little bit of orientation. So we collaborate with institutions, public libraries, scientific libraries, museums, archives. And as I just said, rarely we get the data that we use to chat, to create the chats from them directly, but we use existing databases of IT centers, library management systems, sometimes even the CMS. The content management system of the websites, especially when it's about service questions. And these data arrive in different forms. So Mark 21 is our standard format, which is widely used with our partners. Just user data, of course, we use that too. So everything we get from the chat states, if the data protection clauses of the libraries allow, we use that to improve the system. And by now we have almost 2 years of experience and user data that or experience with user data. We deleted that, of course, after we learned from them, that we use to improve the chats. Then HTML, if you take information from the website, also had to talk about that. Don't do that, but if there's no other possibility, you can. And then text and PDFs, of course, if you want to talk with documents or other document formats. All these are turned into chunks. So the background is that if you have a huge file, I don't know, a book, an LLM, an artificial intelligence cannot process that amount of data, so you have to chunk it up. This is also a bit of an art form because there are different ways to chunk up there. You have to create overlaps between the different chunks so the LLM understands the meaning. A lot of testing there. It's one of the most overseen, I think, techniques when it comes to improving a conversation. And these chunks are stored in a database. I'm going to show it to you in a second. And then after they have been stored in our database, we send them to the LLM. So actually, again, one very important step in setting up a chatbot on anything is that first you have to turn your data in whatever form into so-called embeddings or data vectors, which is nothing else but a long number that is representing the data that you've given to the LLM in a multi-dimensional space. Just think of it encoding your information into big number. The trick about this big number is that it doesn't only store the value of the word itself, but it also stores the word in its context. So if you have a dog, if let's say the word is a dog, this number not only represents dog, but also is representing the sentence, the dog is barking loudly in the street. So it takes not only the value itself, but also the meaning in a context. And this is the trick actually about artificial intelligence, that it stores meaning in a numerical sense. and not only the specifics. And this embedding is then, is then stored in a vector database, which is also operated by us, and also important when you discuss data protection. And then it's there. So you have the metadata in. So this black box at the bottom is finished. So now we move to the upper box, conversations. What happens if a user asks a question? So the user types the question into the bot. The bot is forwarding these questions also to the embedding engine. So also this question is turned into this large number. This large number is sent to our vector database, and in the vector database, you perform a similarity search. So you'll be searching for the vectors in the database that are similar to the question of the user. Remember that it's not only about the word, but about the context and the whole meaning. One of my regular sermons is that don't confuse search with AI. They're two completely different kind of animals. Because in many discussions with libraries and archives, I have the impression that what the requirement is do a search, but make it better with AI. So that's the wrong approach. The right approach is to think of it as something completely different. That of course helps the same purpose in the sense that it finds you material, that finds you books, finds you films. But the approach is completely different. The one is so search is precision, AI is probability, and probability by definition is imprecise. The interesting thing is that the more we have in our backend the ability to increase precision, also of the AI, but the more precise you get, the less conversational the conversation with the bot becomes. So obviously we humans are by nature imprecise, and the bot is there to replicate human interaction. So with a very knowledgeable virtual librarian. So once this embedding of that was created by the user question has found results in the vector database, these results, which are called contexts, are then sent again to the LLM, and this is where actually the conversation, the answer of the LLM is created, because out of the context, which is the search result of the vector database, the LLM picks the most valuable results, checks which kind of prompts imply, which are the commands you give the LLM on how to choose and how to behave. And once results and prompts are checked, the answer is forwarded to the bot and given to the user. So at this circle, user, bot, embedding, vector database, LLM, prompts, bot, user, is done with every single feedback of the user that you give. So if you have a conversation of 10 question and answers, you have 10 circles that this takes. And by the way, the circle, this kind of circle gets bigger every time, because part of the context that comes from the vector database to LLM is also the previous conversation. So if you're at answer 5 of your conversation, you'll get all the previous answers and exchanges with the user also as part of the context. This is why actually the data that is exchanged with the LLM becomes bigger with every exchange that you make. So enough of the theory. I'll refer to that in the coming webinar. What I want to show you now is practical examples of a service bot. So a service bot is, there are two ways of getting your service information, opening hours, for example, most common example, into the bot. Either you take all the documents that you want to, with information that you want to provide, and put it into a document bot, which will come in the next step, or you just write direct prompts. Prompts are the commands you give to the bot on how to behave. And of course, you can put commands into the bot about what it should answer in the case of a specific question. So let's go back to the browser. So this is the bot of the Universidad Católica del Uruguay. The interesting thing, I'll give you a small intro into this part of our backend. So of course, this is the name. This is the language model we use for this specific client. You can also use Gemini or Mistral if for Europeans. If data protection is a very hard requirement, you can add users and stuff, and then you can. So there are two sets of prompts. We provide, let's say, we as the operator provide a set of prompts that makes the bot run and takes our experience into account. And we link that to prompt templates. And these templates, then you have a service template with this is a recommendation bot template, this is a document bot template. So we, for each and every environment, we set up different templates that the bots can refer to. But then if you go to let's do this one. This one is better. And if you then have a specific bot, you can refer to those templates, and you have kind of the basis of the prompt. This is the test bot of the National Library of Germany. It's also a service bot. And you can here, for example, you can choose the embedding model that you use to turn your data into numbers. And of course, you can prompt yourself. This is what we call the self-service options. So you can hard prompt a greeting. So funny fact here is the prompts are written in two different languages. So actually the command is written in English here. The greeting is in German. And sometimes also below, they mix up English and German. And also, for example, in the Spanish, this is why I picked it from Montevideo, half of the commands are in Spanish, half of the commands are in English. This is not how it should be, but actually the bot pretty much ignores the differences in languages and follows all the orders. So it's the one thing I want to show you here is, I'm sorry, it's in German, but is this wenn done, which is translated into if then. Don't forget that if you prompt something, it's in the style of a command. So when is if. So what you say is if somebody, or no, this is a nicer example. If somebody searches for music or sheet notes, then, and this is the command, answer that you have to ask back whether it's in Leipzig or in Frankfurt, because this particular library has Leipzig and Frankfurt offices. So you prompt, first of all, you don't prompt a result immediately, you prompt a question back, which is already a big difference to search. And then once that is said, you can say, okay, if the answer is Leipzig, then answer that, or if the answer is Frankfurt, then answer that. All right, so I'll show you how this is done, how this example is done live. So this is the chatbot of the National Library of Germany, and I say, okay, I am searching for sheet music. And here it asks me back, Standort means location. Is it either Leipzig or Frankfurt? So I say, okay, I am in Leipzig. All right, and here it says, here it's Musiklesesaal in Leipzig. This is where I can find the sheet notes here. So instead of trying to give an answer right away, it asks me back and provides me an answer based on the information I have given to it. And this is already fundamentally different to any kind of search. So instead of a search where you have to search a long list of results, and then find what's suitable for you. In the context of a chatbot, you have a conversation, and in the best of cases, the conversation is good enough to provide you with the one answer that you need to satisfy your needs. So task analysis here. I don't want to delve too long on this service questions because it's quite obvious and to be done. But it's very important that you remember, if you prompt something, it doesn't suffice to just provide information. So you cannot just put service or opening hours into the prompt window and say and assume that the bot then knows what to do. You have to say, if asked for opening hours, then answer, then refer to this information to provide an answer. And the good thing about the bot, again, is that our bot knows time and date and location. So if you say, okay, is it open tomorrow? The bot knows today is Wednesday, tomorrow is Thursday. Then based on the information that you provided in the prompt, it can say, yeah, it's open tomorrow, but only until 6 o'clock. Again, a very big difference to search, where you have to say, is it open on Thursday at 6 o'clock? And then maybe you get an answer. Here you can just, assume that the bot knows. Another experience that we've made here is that if more people than one person work on the prompts, coordinate well, because what bots hate is inconsistency. And in the moment you have conflicting information or especially conflicting prompts, the bot doesn't know what to do, and then it starts with his or her, don't know what gender the bot is, honestly, then it starts to hallucinate. And the best medicine against hallucination is provide all the data it needs and be consistent. However, a bottom line for service prompting information, it doesn't need to be service. It can be any kind of information, of course. We also do it for law firms to provide quick answers to law questions. But any question has to be it's a limited the amount of information that you can provide with prompting is just limited, because you have to, as you have just seen, you have to do a hands-on approach with if you ask this, then ask that. If you ask that, and that works, I don't know, for 2-3 pages of information, but not more. If you want more, you have to follow this approach. So here, what I'm showing you now is an example of the University Library of Frankfurt, which runs a big archive, which we're setting up right now. And the archive has digitized, like many archives did, thankfully, 218,000 pages of Hanauer Anzeiger, which is a newspaper of the region, starting in 1804 until 1941. And now you're able to chat with this newspaper. They also have made, I think, a very valuable concept of what they expect from, why they do that, what they expect from the bot, what the quality requirements are, and a set of conversations that they want the bot to lead. So, you want to remove barriers of entry, because if you do search, you assume that people who do the search already kind of know what they're searching for, and a bot is more for exploratory use. And a very important point, you want to link sources to the answer. So when you ask a summary of a number of pages, or when you ask a question with a very specific answer, you want to be able to check that. I think this is one of the educational tasks of libraries, because we talked to many students, also when we made a little survey of how students use it, and students tend to just believe what ChatGPT or Gemini say. And I think the only way of educating them to be a little bit more critical is to provide the sources, so that they can check whether what the bot said is actually what the sources give as information. And then, of course, another thing, which I think is one of the overseen things in providing a bot, is that a bot can provide different answers based on the target group it is addressing. So it can talk differently to a scientist, let's say more elaborate, more with links to more sources, then to an let's say impatient student, then to a child, or somebody who is visually impaired. So you can what you really can do with a bot is to create, based on the same amount of information, you can create very different conversations that cater to the need of a particular audience. So this is also, of course, the bot again needs the information, what kind of audience it is talking to. So you would need an age range or the role or something. But if the bot has this information, it can answer completely in a completely different way. I'll give an example of that at the end of this webinar. So how does it look like? So you have on the left, you have an example of these newspapers that they have digitized. They're actually in ancient German writing, which even Germans of today have a hard time reading. And they have been digitized. By the way, we did the same with press releases of the Museum of Modern Arts. So you can ask, which kind of exhibition was on in 1923, and you'll get the press release on that exhibition. But let's go back to the ancient German newspapers. So this was all digitized. Now, another feature of AI, this is what came out of digitization. So as you can see, not all of it makes sense. Not all of it is even language. There is a lot of black ink on paper that doesn't make any sense. Still, check the results yourself. We'll go back to the browser. So this is the German National Library. So we'll go to the chatbot of UB Frankfurt. So again, here you see our backend. Your primary language is German. Load embeddings. Well, if you want to tour through the backend you can limit the time that you retain the conversations for quality control. Actually, we can do audio. This is load embeddings is actually the way we get the information in. That's a tool. Anyways, that's another webinar. Just to provide you an overview. If you're interested in how that works, let me know. Now we want to check it on the website. So we make a new conversation, and we say, okay, it's a little bit cheated. I know that this information is in the newspaper, so but still, what is the English policy towards Palestine in the 1920s? Because actually the newspapers that we have already in the bot are from the 1920s, so we are going to an original source here. And the bot is thinking. By the way, note that you were greeted in German, answered in English, and the bot answers in English too. And it says, according to a about in the Hanauer Anzeiger, this is actually the page I've just shown you. British policy towards Palestine in the 1920s is initially did not favor either Jews or Arabs. However, this approach was found impractical, blah, blah, blah. So very interesting piece of history. And here's the source, which is the page one of the pages I've just shown you. And of course, once this is live, you can click on it and then check out the page, whether this is really what the page just said there. So in this way, you can have conversations about all the context of all these 280,000 pages in a very easy way. I wish I had that when I studied law and art history, because then many of my questions would have been answered quite quick. Well, there's something also in, burying yourself in a pile of books. But, if the deadline is approaching, a quick question would have solved a couple of headaches much quicker. All right, so let's go back to the presentation. Tasks and challenges with these bots. So the headline of this webinar is, life experiences. One of the experiences is a very interesting one. How do we deal with fascist content? As you may remember, the editions of the newspaper run until 1941, so in the midst of the Second World War, and a lot of stuff, let's say, in this newspaper are hard to read for contemporary ears, or even for ears of that time if they were in fascist. So the problem is how to deal with that. Because on the one hand, of course, you want to have it out because you don't want to spread propaganda. But on the other hand, you want to have it in because if you're a scientist and you work on this time, you don't want to filter information for a scientist who's trying to discern where this attitude came from, for example. So there is a balance and to be struck between what to keep in and what to keep out, and how would your prompts work. So in a public library, we had this in the very beginning because, of course, we didn't want the recommendation bot to recommend an let's say uncommented version of Mein Kampf of Adolf Hitler. But and we wrote some complicated prompts to keep that stuff out. However, we deleted all these prompts because by now the models have become so good in output control that they do this work for us, which is, in the context of a document bot, not always a good thing, because it actually, the models keep content out that we want to have in for research purposes. And so we have the funny we're having the funny problem that we want to get information in that the model is trying to filter out. Also, censorship requirements. At that time, not everything that was written in the newspaper is well. And this time, more seems to be the same. But at that time, it was government policy and not only government action. You had a censorship requirements, and so not everything that was in the newspaper was actually fact. So also, how do you present this knowledge to the user that all these newspapers ran through a censor? So all these are practical questions, not really AI questions, but if you set something up like this, it becomes very quickly AI, because of course the answers you find to all these problems have to be reflected in the prompts, so in the commands you give to the bot. Another technical limitation is if you work with large amounts of data, is the context that I spoke about when I did the little theory thing, because the context does not always reflect the priorities of the user. Example, if I ask a question about British policy towards Palestine in the 1920s as a printed edition, let's say by default, the LLM doesn't know what's more important to me, whether it's a printed edition or whether the topic is Palestine. So what happens is that the bot thinks, Palestine is a topic that's more important, and forgets about the part of the printed edition, or doesn't put so much effort in finding printed editions, which results in the fact that actually the context that you are receiving as a result from the database has a lot about Palestine and British policies in the 1920s, but not always printed editions, but also a lot of ebooks. So the number of ebooks might hinder the deliverance of all the printed editions you have, and kind of spoil the results. What we do is we evaluate the results again with an LLM, and then if the LLM is not happy with the results because there are too many ebooks, we do a new search and do the same thing again and again until we only have printed editions, and then only we deliver the answer to the bot to provide a right answer. And of course, quoting sources is an issue. Page numbers. How does an LLM know what a page number is and what the temperature is, or what the age of a person is? It simply doesn't. I mean, as humans, we know it's in the bottom right of the page, but sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's in the middle top. So how do you teach an LLM page numbers? So linking to a document is not an issue, but linking to a page number inside a document very much depends on the data that you provide to the bot. Which comes to the main, also one of the main sermons that I always repeat. The bot is only as good as the data you provide to it. If you don't provide good data, the answers you will receive by the bot will be not as you expect it to be. All right. So that was the document bot. Now I come to the part where I steal from the presentation of the Cologne team. So everybody who's fluent in German can listen live to the Cologne team tomorrow in German, but here in English, it's on me. So let me introduce you to Kai. Kai is the name the Cologne people gave to their bot. And Kai is a recommendation bot that should answer questions about the library, contents of the Cologne University for Applied Sciences. So how did the Cologne people approach the project of a bot? So they set up actually quite a large project team that included librarians, IT people, also people from public-facing, customer-facing services, help desks, and defined the requirements and the questions that a bot has supposed to answer. They created question sets, and actually you can run in our solution, but I'm sure that the other solutions will do the same. You can run a number of, I don't know, 50 questions automatically through the system and see how different prompt setups or how different models work. So they created these question sets. In the team, remember what we said in the service bot thing, they had different permissions. So permission management, I think, is needed, because not everybody is supposed and allowed to write prompts, because then, you know, one person says, give me everything, the other thing, and be a bit more careful. Somebody has to have the hat on and have all permissions. Then, of course, they created various demo bots. I'll show them to you, and system prompting. Actually, they even worked on the templates that we provided to them. And in the end, they chose as a model LLM, as a model, a Mistral, the French model, which, because as a public institution in Germany, data protection is a large topic, and also with the current political events, not everybody feels well to ship data across the Atlantic. So Mistral was the LLM of choice. I think in terms of quality of the languages, it does 95% of what Gemini, at least in text models, of what Gemini and ChatGPT do. It's not as quick. So you wait a little bit longer for the answers. Probably the server farms, wherever they are for Mistrals, are not as powerful as the ones of Google, which is to be expected. But that's, again, one of the trade-offs you have to make when working with AI. All right, so what did they do with the setup? So, for example, our template provides 5 results. They increase these results to 10 when they provide an answer. Another interesting topic is the preference for newer releases. So, if you, for example, I think the most obvious for scientific research, of course, it's obvious that it's more recent. But how does the bot know? So why should an LLM provide, let's say, have a preference for newer releases than to older ones? Maybe the older ones are more close to the topic. So this is also something that you have to decide, you know, how to balance or how to weigh different values. So if you have, for example, a topic on cancer, and if you have a work that is 100% on the topic that is 20 years old, will you prefer that to a newer study that is only 2 years old, but that is not 100% on the topic? So it's not evident. And if you don't know, how should the LLM know? So there's a lot of fine tuning to be made on prompt level to make the decisions that are necessary here. Of course, to design the title and the years of publication, they look very different in Cologne than they look in Berlin. Then you say, okay, we want a conversational language. We don't want to be too official. Interesting also, they also, the Cologne team also said, you know, there are certain types of questions where we think that other tools are more valuable than a chatbot. So if you ask, for example, for an ISBN, you are forwarded to Catalog Plus, which is a discovery system. And also, if you search for journals and articles, also a very, you know, interesting and very practical experience. So far, we have no bot running that answers questions about articles and journals, because the data that we receive, and for example, in Mark 21, don't have summaries of the content of these articles and journals. And if we don't know what's inside the journal, how should the bot know? The only way it could get an answer is from the title. But of course, the title is not a very good way of providing recommendations. So journals and articles, as long as we don't have a summary or even the whole article or journal, and this is why we're really, you know, exploring the world of open access, the bot really cannot do it. again, the very basic rule, a bot is only as good as the information you provide. And then, of course, if you have further questions, they included their own support form, and I'll show you that in a second. And then, of course, the no-goes. So no system prompts, no programming code, no disclosure of contacts, address, and usage. So these are the things that don't want the bot to tell to the world. So this is what they did. And now let's check how it looks in real life. So this is the website of Technology, Arts and Sciences, University of Applied Sciences of Cologne. Actually, the interesting thing is they have the same bot, but they have it in two different environments. So, of course, you can here on the bottom right, you have Kai. Note how the color changes, also a nice gimmick. Of course, you can have the bot in various places, wherever in your in the environment of your university, of your library. So we open Kai. And now an interesting conversation, which is actually was a real conversation that I just stole from the chat histories. So I need to write something about democracy in the 18th century, and I am supposed to search for works in Scopus. You know, this AI thingy that is it Clarivate Elsevier built. So, you know, they're not only asking questions about, you know, specific recommendations, but they also ask, you know, about Scopus. So one of the learnings, if as soon as you provide something to type in, people type in everything. So it first answers, I can help you find relevant literature in the 18th century in our library catalog. So, you know, it tells the student, look, I'm not really about Scopus, but, you know, if you want to, I'm about our catalog and our books that, or publications that we provide. But the students, as students go, but I really need to work with Scopus. Can you give me tips? So for working, I recommend assessing Scopus directly. But I need help with Scopus. So this time the bot is really headstrong. And here it is. You know, he gives in. Also, a bot is only human. And here, basically, he gives me tips now how to use Scopus. Keywords, Boolean operators, use quotation marks, exact phrases, which is, it probably took from the Scopus manual. So there are two things that I wanted to show you with this example. The first thing is the bot. I always say the bot is always as good as the information you provide it with. The thing is that there are two sources of information. The source of information that you give to him as part of the rec system, but of course there's also the training knowledge. So the knowledge that the bot gets in its training by Mistral, OpenAI, and these people. And actually, it's very hard as an operator to know when he accesses the training knowledge and when it limits itself, as it did in the first answers, to the knowledge that you gave to him. And usually, if you insist, after a while, the bot is just human and gives in. So this is what it does. In 90% of the cases, that's a good thing. So this question has been answered. Sometimes it just does stuff that that we're also surprised about. But that is also part of the AI. So I think in the bottom assessment, this is a good thing. And of course, you know, greeted in German. Again, the conversation was in English. So, you know, this site is online. You can just check out the link and try for yourself what the bot asks. But, you know, just to finish that conversation, and what's going on in your library? Yes, I want, now I want the titles. So now you have the titles on democracy coming out. And of course, they link to the library collection, Secular Enlightenment, Democracy, Republic, Societies, Champion of Democracy. Actually, this is a good book. I'm clicking on that, and then you forward it to the OPAC of the Cologne library. So this is how the bot works. But of course, as we are with practical experiences here, and I still have 10 minutes more to go, I'll show you how that looks in the backend. So we have the chatbots. So this is, as you can see here, it's the own URL of the Cologne library. So they have their own server, they have their own database, they have their own URL, and this is where they operate. So these chatbots here are chatbots that they set up. So this is obviously the Mistral model that they set up. This is a DigiBib. This is another location in the infrastructure of the library. This is just a demo bot for internal purposes. This is an educational bot for the team inside. So they have a number of bots they set up themselves to test different prompt setups, to educate people, and to for whatever use they want. I don't really know. It's up to them to set up any bot they want for any particular purpose. So this is the question I asked. So what happens? So this is the greeting. This is the question I asked. This is what it answered. And what I want to show you here, and what I said in the beginning about context, this is actually, let me just check user message tool call. This here is an important part, because it tells you what of my input in my question was actually used as a search query to the database. And so it doesn't take the original, so my original command, but it interprets my request and says already books and electronic resources, which I never asked, and social aspects, preferably recent publications. Preferably recent publications came from the prompts. So this is also nothing I asked, but it's part of the query because it was prompted like that. And in English or in German, this is also part of the prompts, because I asked in German, but obviously in English, but obviously the bot knows that it should also suggest something in English and German. So here you can see how my query is combined with the prompts that the Cologne team has made in order to make a request to the database. And then this is the tool result, not interesting, but now comes, the tool result, and here comes, actually, this is the context that came out of the query to the vector database. So as you can see, this is a lot. And as I said in the beginning, out of all this stuff that came from the database, you can see it's a lot. The model then looks for the result that it thinks it's most suited to the query, to the question that I have posed. So this is how it works. This is also basically, by the way, how you check out if something doesn't work, because then you check the query. Is the query what I want it to be? What is the context that came from the similarity search in the database? So this is how we work with what we. This is basically what we do every day when we check the conversations and whether the expectations were matched by the bot. All right, back to the presentation. So the learnings of the Cologne team. So the majority of the users works very well with the bots. It leads conversations. Actually, we have been around for almost 2 years now with AI. And what you can really see is that the conversations have gone better and better without us having to do anything about it. Because what you can see is that a very steep learning curve with the audience. So the level of expectations of chatbot users like 18 months ago is very different than the level of expectations today. So you can see that, let's say, a broad part of the population that use our services has learned especially what to expect from a bot. So what to ask and what to not ask, how to lead a conversation with a bot. So this is the majority. Many, and this is, let's say, the part where what we have seen in the last days, years improve is that they could be right. actually writing full sentences leads to better results. So that is part of the communication skills. Then, of course, the bot is not all knowledgeable. So the bot cannot. For example, the Cologne bot is built as a recommendation bot. It's not built as a service bot. So it doesn't have all the information on curricula and on where is what on the campus. And it says it's a recommendation bot, but of course nobody reads that. So whenever you offer something, everything will be asked. It's also one of the things you have to think about. So, for example, in the Berlin libraries, we started also a recommendation bot, but after 2 months, we gave up and also provided with answers of 90% of the service questions it has been asked. Factual questions, pretty much news questions, what has been going on, I don't know, in France yesterday. Of course, that's also not the task of the bot. Assistance with text creation, that's also not a task of the bot. So all these things are part of day-to-day conversations, which of course the bot cannot do. And there's nothing you can do about it because of course it has to stay in the framework that you define. Very few, and this is also something that ties in with public debate, at least in Europe. There are people who share very personal data. So I invent an example, but let's say the level of the level of information given is similar. So imagine you are highly depressive, and you want to do a research of what you can do about your depression, and you research in literature, and then in a very detailed way, you share your health issues with a bot in order, in the hope to get a better result. But the bottom line is that you share very, very personal information about your depression, about how it went. And I went to the doctor 3 times, and he said this, and that was wrong. And so, can you help me with finding a book that tells me better? So there is a data protection concern, and of course this needs to be addressed. So it's nothing, from what I've seen, it's nothing to take lightly. And it has to be addressed in communication, it has to be addressed in the rules, and it has to be addressed in the way information is stored and not stored. The bot behavior, so mostly very good understanding of what is being searched for and meaningful conversations. We have just seen the Scopus conversation, but also the Frankfurt conversation about Palestine. Sometimes it does more than it should. You have to understand that chatbots, all of them, are know-it-alls. They hate to not be able to deliver an answer. So even if they can't, they do. Also kind of very human in a way. So you have to be very strict in your prompting, that in the moment a bot doesn't know something, it says so. So, for example, in the Cologne conversation that we've just said, it says, I'm a recommendation bot. I'm not here to answer Scopus. And then there are days where we don't understand at all what the bot does, but there are these days. That is where the black box thing comes from. Then the last thing, so I'm done with the Cologne people, and to cheer everybody up who has not yet fallen asleep, of course, you can do other stuff with the bots as well. So the following example is one of my favorites. I have 2 sons, very small, and I go with them to the library. And I have found many books, by the way, because they love the images. They always forget the titles. They describe me the images. And I saw a book about boxing. So when you design a chat in a children's library here in Query, of course you can provide the cover pages, and you can provide icons. So the book is preceded by a book. The audio book is preceded by headphones. I just had. So you can really adapt the bot not only to research questions, but also to children or to whatever. Yeah, that's really it. I didn't get, now we're 1 minute before. If you bear with me, I will just quickly screen through the chat questions, if there are any. Does AI limit the access to source knowledge? That is the question I hope I answered with a document bot. Sometimes, if it deems it to be, I don't know, extremist or something. try with the library catalog that we can see how it works. One thing is, so the way that it is set up is that we receive an export of Mark 21 data, so a full export that we then import, turn into embeddings. And and then we receive on an hourly, daily, weekly basis all the things that were deleted from the catalog and the stuff that has been newly acquired. So we don't have a direct connection to any database because as the similarity search works with embeddings, and the embeddings have to be created. So that is that. By the way, we're done. I have to go too. Please fill in the survey if you have a moment of time. It helps us to design the next webinars, also to reach out to more people who have might also have an interest in this. And if you have more questions, ask me on email, LinkedIn, and of course, we'll share a YouTube video of this presentation and of this, and also the file of this presentation. Thank you, and until next time.